Hey everyone, it's Kate from Sleep Time Consulting. Today is Wednesday and I am going to be talking to you about settling. So this is kind of the last one of my fundamentals that I've spoken about. So if you haven't seen any of the previous videos, have a watch. We've talked about sleep environment, we've talked about the importance of routines, and today we're talking about settling. So I spoke about this before, but my aim today is to give you a bit of an overview as why sleep consultants go on and on about settling and when it's an issue and what to do about it. Because as you hopefully know by now, my core fundamental in terms of why I do this and what drives me is all about giving you the information to help you understand your little one's sleep situation so that you can make changes that work for you. That's the aim of all of these videos. So let's talk about settling, because that's the topic for today. Now, the act of settling is literally how your little one falls asleep, and that can be in many ways. There are variations from someone who can place their child down, leave the room and they settle, to someone who might rock, hold, feed, dance around with, get them to watch a light show. All that kind of stuff is all the potential ways your child can settle. And the only time, really more than this, the only time this is going to be a problem, i.e. what you do at the moment, is if it's a problem. So if you look at kind of conversations that happen around sleep, there are quite different, so polarising views. And for me, there's no right or wrong way. It's the way that works for you. And that's really vital to get right. So for example, if you are feeding your child sleep or rocking them or whatever it is, and they sleep fine, or they wake up an amount of times in the night that you are happy with, you do not need to change anything. So really, by having this conversation about settling, I'm kind of talking to those people who are probably questioning whether what they're doing at the moment is causing some of the disruption that they're feeling and that they want to make change with. So it's only about, if it's a problem, address it. And that's really about your own personal things. And people do often ask me, in fact, I was talking to a mum of a 6-month-old this morning, and she just like, my little one's up between 7 and 9 times every night and it's just too much for me. And I said, that's really honest of you to sort of say that, because if it's too much for you, then you can make changes and we can help with that. But it's not to say that 6-month-old will sleep through the night. You know, it's all about kind of what's right for you. So it's all about kind of working out where you're at on your journey with it all, and if you need to make kind of tweaks. Now, the reason why, if we get into kind of the why, so the reason why settling becomes part of the conversation is back to something I've mentioned in a previous chat, which is sleep cycles. So to go over that briefly, we all have sleep cycles that we go through, and the classic age range that I talk about is kind of from the 4 months onwards as children, and they have about a 45-minute sleep cycle. And without going into all the details of it all, it's essentially a 45-minute journey, and you go round the sleep cycles, it's a circular thing. Different parts of sleep, light sleep, dark sleep, deep sleep, not dark sleep, REM sleep, and then light sleep again. And it's all about what happens at the end. So at the end of that sleep cycle, there is a moment of wakefulness. There's this kind of gap, in a sense, of the sleep cycle. And the reason why we talk about settling is that if a child is waking up more frequent than you like, and they've got some help to go into that sleep cycle to begin with, then that's when we start to think about whether the act of settling, so what happened at the settling point, could be causing the wakings. Because if they're waking up, which is normal for them to wake up, but they're calling out for that thing to get them to go back to sleep, or if they need more help to go back to sleep, then that's where we start to think, okay, is the settling causing that waking? It could be other things as well. So this is where it becomes a little bit tricky. It could be something along the lines of hunger. And so you need to kind of understand whether your child's well fed or if they have a need to do that. The trick to work out whether it's hunger or not really is to say, okay, if you feed your child and then they sleep for a super good period afterwards, then it probably was hunger. But if you feed your child and they wake up quite frequently afterwards, then perhaps it wasn't just the hunger that was going on. There's other things like daytime naps. They can actually affect what happens in terms of the night time. So you can often find that if they don't sleep well in the day, it can cause them to wake. They might be a bit disturbed, a bit overtired, and they might just need a little bit of reassurance to go back to sleep. So it's not always a settling, but we're talking about identifying whether it is or not. So let's say you've identified that settling might be kind of your issue. So now it's time really to talk about what to do about it. So it's all about this scale, and I've got somewhere, I did a kind of a visual. I'll dig it out and I'll pop it up. So it's all about the scale that you sit on. I'll try and do this so you can see it in the video. But its starting point is really from what you can do in terms of being super gentle, right? So this is going into no cry solutions, gentle sleep book, that sort of thing. And so your settling becomes about how you are really involved with your child. So you're really helping them to settle. You're kind of trying to settle them down in your arms, or perhaps you're holding them, perhaps you're feeding them. And so that's the kind of the very gentle side of settling. And it's really about being very responsive and the thing that gets them sleep. Again, all cool if your child sleeps well. But if you're looking for kind of making transitions away from that, then one of the things you can do is then start to sort of move along the scale, essentially. So you're talking about having a less removed involvement in their settling. So option one is doing something like a habit stacking type approach. Let's talk about that first. So this becomes about trying to navigate a little bit further away from what you have been doing. So let's say you've been feeding to sleep and you're looking to change that. Then instead of feeding to sleep, why do you hold to sleep? And perhaps you get your partner to do that because it will help with the association. And then you're putting them down after that. And then perhaps instead of putting them down fully awake, you might put them down a little bit more awake, and you kind of work towards them settling themselves a little bit more. So you're really navigating that way. And at the same time, or as an alternative option, you have a kind of a pick up, put down strategy. This works really well with tiny ones, up to the age of probably about 5-6 months-ish. And what that involves is placing them down in the cot, offering them reassurance. If they cry, you pick them up again to calm them down. You then put them back down again, and you kind of repeat that notion. So you're not allowing any long levels of crying, but you would just encourage them to settle, perhaps in a kind of an awake state. So that's a sort of pick up, put down approach. And then you get to kind of like the middle ground, and that becomes about trying to be a little bit stricter about what you're doing, but still being really involved. And this isn't about, often people say they've been advised not to make eye contact, or they've been advised to stay very distant. This middle ground is kind of about, making sure that your child is in a good state of tiredness to go down, helping them to settle. So you're putting them into their sleep space awake, and then helping them to settle there. And that can involve picking them up, but you might want to wait a minute or two before doing it. You can offer reassurance, lots of touch, patting bottoms, all that kind of thing, singing songs, rubbing tummies, whatever it may take, to calm them down, and see if then after a while they calm, hopefully not after a while, but that they calm from your touch and your involvement, and then you kind of navigate kind of away from that in terms of being able to let them do it themselves. And so you get to that kind of point whereby they're able to settle themselves more, and then you can start doing something like a gradual retreat, which means that you're sort of lessening your involvement over time. So you are very involved to begin with, and then move kind of away from that, essentially. And then you really get into the stricter side of things slightly. So, and all of these are methods that I've learnt about. All of these are methods that I've considered. None of these are my go-to method, because it's all about one size fits all. So I want to give you an overview, and I'm about to talk about stricter methods, but I don't want anyone to think that I'm super strict in the way that I approach things. I'm very much about a collaboration and understanding your situation. But when it comes to the sort of stricter methods, quite simply, you're looking at being more removed. So you could do something like a controlled crying approach, which essentially means you're leaving your child for an amount of time, and then you go back into the room, you calm them down, you reassure them, and you leave the room again. Sometimes for increased increments of times, that's different strategies, but you kind of going back in again. And then you get to the kind of the extreme of crying out. Now, crying out really does just mean that when it gets to the kind of the crunch of things, and that is literally letting your child cry until they settle. So it's a very extreme way of doing things, but it's one of those options that you have in your armoury. Now, as I said, I don't profess to do any of these every time, and I certainly, I don't think I've ever done a crying out recommendation, so just to put your mind at rest there. But there are some times when certain situations it's more suitable for other methods than others, and sometimes that's about whether you've got other children in the house that you want the noise level to keep quiet, or you need it to work quickly because you've got to attend to the other child. And sometimes it's about the parental preference, and some people want no crying and some people are okay with a little bit of crying. I think I will sort of summarise it all in saying it's all about whether it works. So you can start out on a settling process, and if you stay consistent, you should start to see improvement within the first few days. And if you don't, then maybe it's not quite the right approach for you and your child at this time. And that might be worth when you need to kind of reconsider and go, okay, what have I learned from this? Are they starting to improve settling? If so, maybe I'll keep going, or maybe I'll tweak it slightly. If not, maybe I have to kind of just think about why and maybe switch it around to one of the other potential methods. There are loads of different ways of approaching settling with your little one, but they do fundamentally come down to those kind of core concepts, and it's really about trying to work out what's right for you. So hopefully that was a useful kind of trip down. I've just seen there are some questions. Let me just see if it's still on. So what about if an 18-month-old not sleeping with anyone else except mum wants to be breastfed to bed, although he doesn't need it? So that's a kind of a navigation thing, I think, with an 18-month-old. It's a habit that's been built up, and those are fine. Again, like I say, if it's okay, then stick with it. But if your 18-month-old is being fed and is fed frequently in the night, then you need to think about how you're going to change that. And so maybe the steps are to say, okay, instead of me sleeping with the child, maybe if your partner or husband could do that, and see if you can try and break the habit like that. And try and just separate perhaps what happens at bedtime. So if you're looking to change that feeding, then maybe do something like do your feed and then do like a story or something afterwards, and then cuddle to sleep, and try and move the feeding out of the scenario, because that can sometimes help. I'm not against co-sleeping at all, but again, if it's a case that your little one is just very attached to you and looking to feed, then maybe it's a decision of saying, right, we're going to stay co-sleeping, but we're only going to feed, 4 times in the night rather than 6. I'm making this up because I don't know the entire situation, and try and navigate out of that. And then the other times that they wake, just comfort them, cuddle them, tell them it's okay, and encourage them to settle. It can be a bit of a journey, but that's what I would suggest. And then Jennifer said, so 6-week-old is currently having a nap. Great. Robo at Hoover is on for white noise. He's gurgling away, not crying. Feel guilty just leaving him, but is that okay? So I think we can beat ourselves up about this sort of stuff massively, but if our babies are programmed to tell us when things are when they're not happy with them, and crying is one of those communication things, isn't it? So it's what they tell us when they're upset about things. Now you've got a tiny one, and congratulations, and I hope you're doing well. If you feel you need to go to them, then go to them. But if you could leave them just for a few minutes, let the Robo Hoover do its work. I really want one of those, by the way. I'm fascinated by them. Then leave and just respond when is needed, because it's one of those things that actually you want them to be confident in their sleep space. You want them to be happy in there. So leave them being happy in there, because he might be just having a little party on his own. make yourself a cup of tea maybe, have a biscuit, and then only respond when you see that they're upset, because that's really important to do so, especially with a 6-week-old, because they are bundles of cuteness. So hopefully that's a kind of a summary for you guys. What I'll do is I will keep this up so you can have a watch of it. If you've got any questions, either pop them in my chat, drop into my DMs, and we can talk it through. I do a Q&A every Monday, so you can put your questions through there, and I'm doing these series to post up so everyone can watch them back. But thank you very much for joining me. Thanks for your questions, and if you need any help, just let me know. All right, take care then. Bye bye.